And we're gonna go back to this. And we are live. Well, hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the Laughter for All podcast. I am comedian Nazareth, and thank you so much for joining us today. This is episode number 73. We've been around over a year now, already made it to number 56 on the Comedy Stand Up podcast on iTunes. So, thank you so much for watching. We get almost 1,500 downloads. So praise God for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. And also, I do want to remind you that we do have the Live with Nas show every night, every weeknight at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time here and Comedian Nazareth on Facebook. So thank you so much for joining us. And I want to remind you that this Laughter for All podcast is, even though I bring comedians and other different guests, the goal is to lift you up, encourage you, inspire you. And also, when we have a comedian, we look at the life of comedians and comedians because I believe they're the smartest people in the world, and they have something to say, and they've been through a lot. So it's you can learn so much. If you're watching today first time, you go, I can't relate to comedian, I'm not fun. It's not about, it's about life. People, we most of us go through the same things in to, to with our walk with the Lord. We're trying to use our gifting with our careers, with our life, with our singleness, with our marriages, with our kids, with our parents. So today will be no different. And I invited a very good friend. I wouldn't say good, very, because I am bad at keeping in touch with her. But she is so funny. She is so funny. And sometimes it used to be hard in the Christian market to find a funny comedian. There's very few, and we've had them all on the show. And Kristin Weber is wonderful. She's hilarious. She's very clean, and she's a great author, speaker. I want to introduce her officially. Kristen's clean, sharp, and occasionally alternative approach to comedy has brought her all across the US and Canada, where she performed at conferences, churches, in popular clubs, on cruise ships, and more. Kristen opened for the Mike Huckabee Show at TBN Studios, and she's currently on tour with Aspire Women's Conference. I think that was, I don't know if that's still happening during the pandemic, but that's a big event, women's conference at Aspire. And she's also an author. She's written two books for teen girls: The Smart Girl's Guide to God, Guys, and the Galaxy, and The Smart Girl's Guide to Mean Girls, Manicure, and God's Amazing Plan for Me. All
Good
right.
job.
And she also wrote a new book that we will talk about in detail today. And hopefully, while we're talking about it, you go to Amazon and order that book. And the book is called, okay, the book is called Adulting for Jesus. Already, I want to buy that book, Adulting for Jesus, a book about purpose, trusting God, and obviously burritos. So, Christian Weber, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. I just noticed I have like my laundry on the bed behind me as you were saying that. But I didn't want to move it in case I was already on. So I'm just going to call out. I know it's there and it needs to be folded. It's clean.
Do
But
you
this is
live
my
in that
level of
room? It
adulting
looks
right
like
here.
you live in that room. Do you live in that
I
room?
do. Yeah. Yeah. So I rent a room from a friend of mine because prior to the pandemic, I was never home. I mean, I was on the road all the
Right.
time. And so a friend of mine was like, well, I have a room for rent if you ever want to rent it. And I was like, yeah, actually, that'd be great. And I said, I'm the best roommate because I'm never there. And then I moved in and the pandemic hit and I've been here 24/7 for almost
Wow.
a year now. So
Okay, so that explains the yoga rug in the back. Is that a
yeah,
yoga mat?
yeah, right there, my Tempur-Pedic mattress cover that ended up being way too soft. One of those things I was like, this is gonna make me sleep so well. And then it was like sleeping in sinking sand.
Where do you live now? You live in Atlanta, right?
Yes, yes, just outside of Atlanta. So that's my home base and
Where
adjusting
did you
to
grow up?
here.
Because I know you were in LA for a while.
Yeah. So how long is this podcast? This could take a
An
minute.
hour, an
Oh,
hour. Go,
perfect. That's
take your
about as
time.
much as it's about as much
Oh,
time.
you don't have, we don't have enough time to talk
No,
about that.
yeah. So I grew up, I was a military brat. So I lived a couple different places for the first few years of my life, but
Mm.
grew up mostly outside of Dallas, Texas. And then I moved right out of college. I did the most un-Texan thing ever, and I moved to Los Angeles, California.
Uh-oh.
And I was there for 6 years and couldn't find parking. So I moved back to Texas and then was there for a few years and then decided that I wanted to live in the mountains, moved to Colorado for 2 years, and then realized I really was not good at driving in snow, which that takes out driving about 10 months of the year there. And
Yes.
then I moved to Atlanta after 2 years in Colorado. So I just need to live like on the upper northern part of the United States now because I've kind of covered most of the West Coast, East Coast, middle. I just need to live in the northern part and then I'll have lived all over.
Now, being a military brat, and I've done so many shows for the military where you're traveling from one country to another. Is that part of why you became funny?
I don't know that that's why I became funny. I think maybe it plays into why I don't stay in one place very well. Because we were just moving and then my parents loved to travel and so I was always traveling. Like there are some people out there which I don't I don't understand it. I respect it, but like they just don't like to go anywhere. They really like where they live and they like to stay home and there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm wired so differently. Like if I don't go anywhere in a couple of weeks, I start to get really antsy. And so I credit that to my military upbringing and then just being born to parents who love to travel. My dad was an airline pilot, so and we were homeschooled.
Oh.
So which we were homeschooled before coronavirus made it cool and um, the my dad would look up flights. He's like, "Oh, there's an open flight to Chicago later this afternoon. Let's all go to Chicago." And so we would just like fly to Chicago and like do something touristy there, and then go home the next day on a flight. And yeah, so it's a very unique childhood, but I think it gave me like a kind of a broad view of the world, if that makes sense. And I think that's where you start observing things, and that plays into comedy because comedy is basically all observation. So moving to new places all the time kind of triggered that awareness of the world and what was going on around me.
You know, you're the funniest homeschooler I know. Even I'm not taking that away from anyone, but I mean, you're hilarious. And when did you find out, oh, I want to be a comedian? I want to do that.
I still don't know that I want to be a comedian. If I'm honest, I don't know how honest I can be.
Yes. Oh, you have. Oh, wait, this is a Christian show. You can't be very
I
honest.
can't be too
Just
honest. I
fake
have
it.
to.
Just act like, oh,
This
praise
is my
God. God.
calling. I was anointed with this gifting, and
Yes.
so I would be okay if I didn't ever have to step on a stage again. I don't like the public in the. I don't like the part of it where you have to like I'm the product and putting yourself out there. What I
Hmm.
love about comedy is I love the writing. I love perfecting a joke. I really love the craft and the being on stage part of it kind of comes with the craft unless you get lucky and can write for a sitcom or write for other comedians. So I really love and connect with the writing part of it. I am a writer at heart. So if a job came along where it was like you could like sit holed up in your room and write things and never have to step on the stage again, I'd be like, yes, sweet. Because that part of it, I don't know at what point I hear other comedians say they're like, I get that high from being on stage and they just like soak that up and they love it and it comes with it. And I like connecting with people and I like meeting different people. I think people are fascinating. I always enjoy getting to know the people that I see and meet. But as far as like being on stage and being, I don't know, it's just a I would be okay without it. So it's that
Really?
balance.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
I've never had a comedian or a comedian say that. I've never had a comedian say, I'll be okay not stepping on stage. But that's amazing because you're so funny. And as a mostly you're either a good writer or a good comedian. I know Jim Hope kind of mixes both of them. But
Hmm.
you, I mean, you said you'd rather write than be
Hmm.
on stage.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I love the writing. And I think that's why I keep going with comedy because the feedback is immediate, which I love the immediate feedback. And in fact, because I just wrote this most recent book, which came out on February 1st, is now available on Amazon.
We'll get to
Um,
that.
there
Yes,
we
of
go. Yeah.
course.
But the hardest part about writing that after coming from stand up is you don't get the immediate feedback because so you're like, is this going to hit? Is this going to miss? You just don't know until the book's already out there. And that's intimidating. Whereas with comedy, it's a very humiliating process when a joke bombs, but you know immediately, okay, that joke didn't work. And you adjust and move on. With most other kinds of writing, you don't get that luxury. You just kind of have to wait and see how it hits and just hope that what you thought was funny, other people will think is funny.
Now, you're a qualified single, right?
Yeah, are we qualifying singles now? Is there a test I have to take?
No, I mean you're qualified single, never been married, no kids, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I
Okay,
am a
let's say
love
Mr.
you.
Right is watching the show
Okay.
and he comes to Atlanta and he
Mhm.
meets you and you guys fell in love
Okay.
and you get married and he goes, "Okay, well, I'm going to get a day job and we can't travel anymore." What would you do?
I would say how much of that job can be done. Well, first of all, we're probably will have to have a conversation before we're married. Um, but I would, we might have to get one of those Sprinter vans and equip it with some Wi-Fi and give him a little home office and then just like ride around the United States and yeah, I don't know. That's a good why are you presenting me with these difficult hypothetical situations that
I'm
maybe
known for
never.
asking questions. I don't want my guests to expect the next question. If they expect the next question, then the show is just another podcast.
I'm like, what do
You're a
you have
mel.
planned? Why so that was so specific. I was like, do you have someone in mind who's like, I
Oh,
want
I
some.
have a lot. I have a lot. I keep a database of single people
Do
in
you
my.
really? Did it just connect?
Yeah,
Now,
I'll have to check your zip code to see who I can get.
yeah,
So
no,
I
you
love
should
to
probably
connect people.
you like to set up people.
Yes.
You should make sure that they know that I own 3 accordions. We'll just put that. I
Oh,
see.
that.
Here's my theory with, yeah, I know, right? So here's my theory with, because all these dating websites, they're always like, you try to like hype yourself up and make yourself really good. I'm like, I want the dating website where you put all of your negatives out there. And if somebody looks at those and is like, oh, I could live with that, then they move on to the positives. Because it's really the negatives that you have to kind of deal with. Anybody like a positive quality, anybody can handle that well, but you need to look at people's like, I have 3 accordions, like that's going to weed out like 99.9% of the guys, and then the 0.1% that are left, there might be some issues with. I'm like, why are
Are
you
you
attracted to someone who owns so many accordions? That's a red flag to me.
now? Why are you? Why three? Can you? If someone said, "Okay, can you get rid of one if you have to for the right guy?"
um yes, so uh so for a while, because they're so hard to travel with and they always get flagged by TSA. But then TSA never knows how to check them, so they really could be like my ticket to a life of crime. Because I've gone through and they've opened it, they're like, I don't even know how to like check this thing. I was like, perfect. Smuggle anything in there as long as it's like disguised as part of the accordion mechanics.
Hey,
Um,
Osama, I got you an idea here.
yeah, exactly. Uh,
Accordion.
so I used to have them kind of stashed in the main places where I would travel to. So I had one in Dallas, and so if I would go home to Dallas and travel from there, I had an accordion there. I had one here, and then I had one in for a while. I think it was in Colorado when I was just moving from there. So I had them strategically placed so that if I were traveling to a region and I was flying into an airport, I could just grab my accordion and go and wouldn't have to travel with it.
That
Uh,
is so smart.
See, yeah. So yes, but now they're all 3 here in Atlanta, and it's a little extra. I look at those and I'm just like, I'm gonna be single forever. It's just gonna be like some people have cats. I have accordions.
But you use a ukulele also on stage sometimes
Sometimes
in
I
your
haven't done
act.
that in a long time. The ukulele kind of was shoved to the side by the squeeze box.
Now, I want to okay, I want to ask a question, and of course, uh, if your parents really they were in the military, thank you for thank them for their
Mhm.
service. Your brother gave the ultimate sacrifice, correct?
He did. Yeah, he
He gave.
died
How
almost
old
3
was
years
he?
ago. He was 29.
He was 29, and he was in the Air Force, right?
Yes. Yes.
And was he? Did he lose his life? In the military? It was.
He did. He was deployed to Iraq. He was combat rescue. He was a combat rescue officer. And so he went on his first deployment to Iraq in January of 2018. And then in March of 2018, March 15, the IDs of March, actually. Yeah, he was on a mission with his team and they were in a helicopter crash. So yeah, he
I'm
he
sorry.
did. Thank you. Yeah. So yes, our family is very we have, given our well, I mean, I don't have the upper body strength to actually like serve my country in a military capacity. I'm kind of they would have to really lower their standards on upper body strength for me too. But yes, I've been around it through my siblings, and my younger two sisters are one is Coast Guard, one is Air Force. My youngest
Wow.
sister is on
God bless
deployment
you.
right now. So yes, I am familiar with the sacrifices and familiar with that world, and very grateful for people who are willing and put their lives on the line for what we benefit from. So
I love that. I do so much. I go to Germany for the Air Force Ramstein. I've been to all
yeah,
the
for my
army
sister
bus.
is stationed.
Yeah. Now, were you mad at God when that happened?
I was never mad at God. Now I was mad. I did experience anger, which is and I'm not an angry person, but
No.
I think you can be angry at the tragedy of the world without being angry at God, because I mean it's ultimately being mad at sin, and everything that sin is done, which the wages of sin is death. So anytime you experience death, I think you you just get mad at all the hurt that is in the world. And my brother knew the Lord and was I talk about him in my book actually, and I hope he doesn't mind if I use him to plug the book. No, I talk about him in the book. So what good is having a brother who gave his life for the country if you
If
can't
you
use him
can
to
sell
drive?
your book.
No, he'd be totally fine with it. He had the best sense of humor. He would be like, use it. In fact, we shared a little bit of a dark sense of humor, my brother and I. And so there's been things that probably jokes I would never tell in a church. I've definitely done them in clubs since my brother died. And there's, and I know my brother would be disappointed if I didn't make people feel awkward with dark humor about his death, which is one of those weird things that only siblings, like when you share that bond with a sibling, you're like, I know it's okay. Even if people are like, is that an okay joke? You're like, yeah, he would be totally fine with it.
That's the
Um,
hardest thing for us comedians is
yeah.
sometimes we have that dark side of comedy and we can't
Mhm.
do it on stage. We can't do that. But yeah.
Not always. There's a time and a place, but I think this is why a lot of comedians deal with depression and anxiety and mental illness, because the same part of our brain that allows us to like look at the world and look at its quirks and turn that into comedy and turn that into laughter is the same part of the brain that kind of allows us to see into that darkness and to see into everything that's wrong. And so you have to use that to kind of gather the material, but at the same time you're also seeing just the devastation and hurt that's out there. And so I think that's it, kind of one comes with the other. So I just think I think, I mean, in my opinion, I
H-
think part of it.
How long after that, Christian, did you were you able to go on stage and be funny?
So it was funny. So let me okay, I'm trying to think. So he died on March 15th. So that's when we got the phone call. And then so when a family member dies, in combat, excuse me, in combat, the immediate family is taken to receive the body. It's called a dignified transfer. And so we were all flown with it, and there were 6 other families who lost loved ones in that same accident. So we were all flown to Dover Air Force Base to receive the remains. Just this surreal, you are processing that, you're processing the fact that you're about to get your loved one back. You don't know fully what's going on. You've been told bits and pieces of the story, and then the story keeps changing. So you're just in this fog. So I was actually trying to figure out in that time, when am I going to be ready to tell jokes again? Because I think it was 3 weeks till my next show. And if you want to know how the hand of God and how God kind of cares about little details. So there was this gap in my calendar at the beginning of the year. And I looked, and like everything was full, but there was this 3-week gap that was like around like the mid-March to, mid-April. And I couldn't fill that gap. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm just supposed to have that time off. That was when my brother died. And so I had that time off. I didn't have to worry about shows in that time. So I was like, God kept my schedule clear, which now every time I have a gap in my calendar, I'm like, who's going to die? So there's the downside of that. So I had that little bit of time off. And so I told my dad, I was like, I'm too sad. There's no way I'm going to be able to make jokes. I was like, I'm not going to, like, 5 years. I can't tell jokes for 5 years. And my dad's like, you're not that popular. You're not getting booked out 5 years. He was like, really about that. I was like, okay, thanks.
Dad.
So it was hard. It was very, very hard to do that, especially because I have jokes about my family and my brother in my act. And those were very difficult to do at first. But it was also, I think I realized through that why we need comedy more than anything. And another thing, like you two, I think, let me see, how would I put this? You experience a different side of Jesus and God when he's like holding on to you through this level of tragedy. You see a different, tender, caring side of him that I don't even know if you can explain without going through it. So I like to say, I wish I could be the person I am now without having gone through what I've gone through in the past few years, but there's no way you can get to that without experiencing a lot of what I've experienced in the past few years. So not too long after my brother died, I did a show, and I didn't even talk about my brother at this point on stage. I just kind of cut his jokes out for a little while, or if I felt like I could do them without crying, I would do them. It's really awkward. I've cried once on stage doing a joke about it. And when the comedian breaks down in tears, it's awkward for everyone involved. There's no way around it. But after this show, I hadn't talked about my brother, hadn't done anything. These 2 women came up to me, and they were like, we weren't going to come to this event tonight, but both of us were like, no, we've got to go. And it turns out they had been at their own sister's funeral, their sibling's funeral. And they were like, we were going to skip this event. We had tickets, but we were going to skip it. We were so sad, but something in us told us to go. And they were like, we know now it was because we needed to hear you and we needed to laugh. They said, we didn't realize how much in our grief we needed that. And so that was one of those things that, like, they had experienced what I had experienced. And I mean, God obviously brought them to that show, and it meant just as much for me to hear that it impacted them. I think I needed to hear that comedy was making a difference in that moment too. So just all those moments.
Let's balance this out. What's the weirdest thing happened to you on the road as a comedian?
The weirdest thing that has happened,
or the funniest, or something you remember that was awkward or something?
There's so many things, but then when you are put on the spot to think of them, you're like, I don't know, nothing weird's ever happened to me. It's all been normal. It hasn't been all normal. Well, I did comedy. One of the earliest things that I was just like, this is odd, was I did that show in a prison. And I was told I was going to be in front of women inmates. And I ended up performing in like in front of the male inmates, like in where they lived. So they were like naked guys showering like 30, 40 feet from where they were just like do, 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 like while I was telling jokes, like my homeschool humor. I was like telling homeschool jokes to showering inmates. So that was ironic, and but it was fun because I got to call my parents because you get a phone call when you go to prison. So I wanted to call them from prison. So just like Nashville County Prison would come up on their caller ID. And you're like,
Oh,
hey,
that's
guess what? I know you homeschooled me to keep me out of jail.
that is so funny. That
Yeah.
is
So there
funny.
was that. I performed in a bowling alley one time, and it was just like this room set aside. And so, I mean, I don't even think I have to explain why that was a
I've
bad
done him,
idea.
so I've done him. Trust me. Oh, that's
Yeah, you
funny.
know. What else? I
It's
feel like,
okay. I mean, if you don't remember, you.
yeah, well, as soon as what's going to happen is as soon as we finish this podcast, they're all going to come, all the memories. But I think I've suppressed them because those stories, we like to forget them when they're super awkward and I don't know.
There's a very large festival that I do every year for the last 12 years, and I always I host this show all the time. And at one point, they said, I got the freedom, said, I want to bring someone else because this is a 2-day event and
Mhm.
you're on stage doing probably 2 hours, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here. And then I
Yeah.
go, okay, can you do 15 minutes before the newsboys come out? Okay, I just did 30 minutes before Jeremy Camp. No, you got to go back up and do 15. So I said, you know what? I need to bring another comedian with me. And of all the comedians I know, I want Kristin Weber,
Mm.
and I know this year's might not happen because the Colorado rules, but I think for sure it's going to be next year,
Yeah,
God
and there's
willing.
still a
But
chance that 2021 could
turn
yeah,
around,
I'm
yes,
my fingers are crossed that it will
it will
hopefully
happen. Yes.
happen this year. I mean, there's no way of knowing, but um I am a cautious optimist. So I feel like
It's hard. We're
yeah.
comedians. They don't book. We're at a level where you don't book us tomorrow. I mean, we
Right.
can,
Yeah.
but I mean, our events has to be prepared. They have
Mhm.
to plan. They have to sell tickets. Sometimes they have to do that. So
Yeah.
it's going to be 3 4 months down the road. So if it rains vaccine tomorrow, it's
Mhm.
going to be 3 months before we can do that. But there's
Yeah.
ways, as I said earlier, we can do it. Tell me, you're a writer, and
Mhm.
earlier when we were talking, you said you transitioned from writing for teens, and I remember the Focus on the Family magazine, Brio, is that
Yeah.
how they say?
Yeah.
Brio. And you were a contributor, and you wrote 2 books for teenagers, but now your new book is about millennials, and I want to give it the right time to speak about the new book. But when you wrote books for teenagers, what do you think the biggest struggle teen girls are going through right now? I have a 13-year-old myself.
Yeah, so oh gosh, right now, well, I mean, with COVID, it's isolation and having everything that they look forward to in life being taken from them. Um, I think in general, hmm, I think there is so much pulling for their devotion, if that makes sense.
Mm,
There's so much pulling for their attention. It's very easy for them to lose sight of God and their ultimate purpose and identity in Him. And I know identity there for a while was kind of one of those Christian buzzwords, and everyone was talking about it. Um, but that's really what it is. They're you've got all, and I think a lot of it is their phones and social media. There are so many distractions, and there are so many opportunities for them to be rejected, if that makes any sense,
mm,
or to see that they are not measuring up in the way that the people they follow online are, or they're not doing the things they should be doing. We just put a high premium on having a following right now, especially at that age. If everyone in your school isn't following you online or liking all your stuff, or uh, popularity is on steroids right now. And so I think it's just kind of a constant battle, and then they don't get to leave it at school. When they come home, the bullying follows them home, the rejection follows them home, the going on Snapchat and seeing that all their friends are out hanging out without them, it follows them home. So there's just almost no break. So it's just this constant like, I don't know, this constant influx of what they're missing, and that what they are not, you know. I think that might be one of the more
That
challenging parts.
that's a very very that's a great point. That's exactly,
Mm.
you hit the what do you call it, the
Oh, on my
symptoms
head.
on the
Yeah.
spot. And if you have, I know you no longer do that, but if you have to write a book right now, today, for teen girls, what would you say to them? How would you help them with whatever symptoms we mentioned earlier?
Gosh, honestly, I would tell them to turn their phone off. I would get
Mm.
every teen girl a flip phone. And it really, honestly, if we're honest, adults have this issue too, but our brains are a little bit more developed, I think, to where even though we may have a hard time with controlling using social media, I think as you get older, you can kind of discern that, okay, this is not a realistic thing, this is gonna pass. You just develop that like life experience. I would say get rid of your phones, get a flip phone to call for emergencies, do not get social media until you're 18, maybe even 21. You're going to be okay without it, and go play with real people. Well, I mean, not right now, because apparently we're all
Right.
dangerous. We're
We're
all
all
potential weapons.
infectious.
Actually, yeah, I've already had COVID, so I should be good for another,
Did you?
2 to
Did
3
you get
months.
COVID already?
I did, yeah. Yeah, I
How
had
did you
it.
feel? What did you have it hard or easy or what? What happened?
Mine was pretty mild. I definitely had symptoms. It was like a cold, with other weird fun symptoms. So, the main
Headaches and
thing,
stuff?
yeah, I didn't really have headaches. I never had to take anything for it other than just taking vitamins and stuff. It was mainly, I just had a runny nose. I lost my sense of smell for a few days, and then there was one day I got super lightheaded. And then that was it. But like, I got tested because I knew I had been exposed. And so I went and got tested, and I wasn't really experiencing symptoms yet. And the doctor asked me, he said, do you have any symptoms? And I was like, well, I mean, I have a runny nose. And he goes, well, when did that start? And I was like, honestly, when I was 11. Like, I've just had a runny nose since I was in middle school. So it was a few days. So I tested positive, and then it's that, like, because it's so varied, and then it takes several days or sometimes even like a week or two for the symptoms to fully develop. It's just like, okay, how bad is this going to be? Like, what am I in for? But fortunately mine was pretty mild, and I was able to get over it. And I feel like I've won, knowing how bad it can hit. And I do have friends who it's hit very badly and they have the long-term symptoms. You feel like you've won the lottery when you get a mild case of COVID, because now I have the antibodies, at least for a little while. Like, I'm not a danger to people, and people aren't a danger to me. So I'm like, I feel like I need to have a sign that I'm like, if you need a hug, I'm a safe person. Like March 21st, I'm safe.
Now,
So
what transitioned you as a writer from writing for teens and to writing this book, which is mostly for millennial?
it is. Can I hold it up?
Of
I'm
course.
bummed you haven't gotten your copy yet. It might be reverse. Adulting for Jesus. Yeah, right there. Yeah, you
Adulting
should
for
be getting a
Jesus.
copy.
That sounds wrong as a Christian right away.
It does. You
Adulting.
have to be careful adulting, because if you put a little adults, depending on what the suffix is right there, it could be very, very wrong. So I transitioned into writing for like my own age demographic, just actually in talking to people after shows. It was through being asked a number of times, because I think people assume that when you're on stage and when you are have a little platform, they assume, well, that must be what you feel very called to. How cool that you are living out your calling. So people always ask, when did you know you were called to comedy? When did you know you were called to
And I
comedy?
asked you that myself.
All
Yeah.
the time. You did. Yeah, you asked that. And so it came from people asking, and me just saying, I don't feel called to comedy. I feel called to writing. And the response when I said, I don't feel called to comedy, but this is what God has called me to do, at least for this season, opened up a lot of conversation with my own generation of um, realizing there's a lot of people who they get to my age. I'm in my mid 30s. They don't know what they're called to do. They don't feel like they are living their fullest life or whatever. Like we've kind of been fed these lines as Christians, if you've grown up in the church, that we should be doing big things for God and we should be fulfilling these ultimate callings and all of that. And it's just put a lot of pressure on my generation that if we don't feel like we're doing this huge thing for God every single day, we're somehow failing at life.
Mm.
So that's where the idea for the book came in, because I mean, if we're honest, it's all the little things that make a difference in, in honoring God with our life. Is not being on stage, it's not being published, it's not being a CEO for Jesus, it's not doing this, it's wiping
Right.
your child's nose for the 50th time in an hour, it's going to that job that you really don't enjoy because you want to support your family. It's all those things that we do to honor God that really bring ultimate fulfillment and ultimately honor God. So I just felt like there was kind of a need to hear from somebody in their own generation, because most stuff that comes to millennials is like, you guys need to get your act together, you're lazy, you're ruining society, and you don't know how to manage your money, and you take yourselves too seriously. It's just all this negative stuff where, yeah, we've got issues and we've got stuff that we got to work on, and we eat way too much avocado toast, and that's probably, where most of our disposable income's going. But most millennials are really trying to do their best to make an impact and kind of take what we've been handed and not squander it. So that was my hope with this book.
Now, is this book written as a story, one story? Is it short, like blogs? Is it like little chapters, little reads? How did you frame it?
So it's each chapter is a different kind of topic. So it's not ultimately one story, although the burrito thread is through, because I have an
Yeah.
obsession with Chipotle. And so this is probably the only Christian market book with this number of food analogies. Like I was like, is this too many food analogies in here? I'm a food driven person, so especially burritos. Um, so no, it's each chapter is just something like an issue that millennials and probably the next generation, the iGen, underneath are dealing with, and just kind of my observations and some humorous stories that I've experienced, and then just some hopefully godly wisdom to kind of help people shift their perspective in going about life in that area.
Now, how long it took you to write the book?
Let's see, my deadline was like a mid-March deadline, so I wrote it like the week before. No, it took about 3 months to write the actual book. The proposal took me a long time. So like, because when you are pitching books to, have you ever pitched a book
Publish.
to
Yes,
a
to
to
publish.
publisher traditional?
Yes.
So the book proposal.
Yes.
So you do the proposal, and you only have to submit a certain number of chapters. And my literary agent was like, the more chapters you can submit, the better. Um, but I'm kind of one of those people who will put in as much work as you require of me and no more until I
Yes.
need to. So it was like 3 chapters was the minimum to get publishers to look at it. So I did the 3 chapters, did them as best as I could, and then I outlined it. And that took forever. It took me like 6 months to just get all of that done. But the
Mhm.
actual writing of the book, like once I didn't start writing until I had a contract signed, and it took about 3 months. And then
And
you go back and forth with edits and stuff. But
so you had a literally agent before,
I
when you.
did, yeah, yeah, still do from uh, back when I wrote for Brio, or what was Brio, Sisterhood Magazine, or Susie Magazine, I
Yes,
think it was when
Susan.
I wrote for it. But
Now,
yeah,
how many publishers did you get submitted to before they?
um, you know what? I would have to go back and check. He submitted to a lot, and it was mostly rejections. Um,
That's true.
And so I think it came down to two were interested, and a third was like, check back in 3 months and we might be interested then. But David C. Cook, the one who ultimately signed it, my editor, shout out to Stephanie, she is amazing. And she really, because when it comes to having platforms or being a name, I'm not a name. I mean, your audience is probably hearing of me for the first time if I haven't bored them to death already.
No,
Um,
you didn't, and I know you.
so, so the fact that they were able to take a risk on me as kind of a no name, like I don't have hundreds of thousands of followers, for which I'm personally grateful, because people don't realize like fame comes with a price and a downside. So like my prayer has always been, I want to be successful without being super well known, if that's even possible in this industry. But the fact that David C. Cook, the publishing company, and my editor really just liked the writing. She's like, she really latched on to the message and the writing, and she's like, I think there's something here. And they were willing to kind of work with the fact that I am not a huge name, and looking at other avenues to get the word about the book out, since I can't sell 50,000 copies based on my own
In
fan
one
base.
week, yes. In 1 week.
Yeah.
That's what.
So right. So I am just super grateful to them for taking a chance on me, and hopefully they won't regret it.
Now you wrote, let's see, there's topics about relationships. Okay,
Mhm.
tell us about that. Relationships. You're single,
I
and what
am.
would you look for in a man if you have to ask God? Let's see, what do you ask for?
So if you're talking about the book, the relationship aspect I take is actually friendships. Through friendships is that relationship aspect. What do I look for in a man?
Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, has to love Jesus. um I would prefer that he be taller than me and have a pleasing nose to face ratio, but those are not non-negotiables.
All right, five what? What are you? How tall
What?
are you? So
I'm
they
five
can.
eight. I'm pretty tall. And it's
So
funny because I'll get messages from like guys after shows, or if a video goes around, and that's always what they want to know. They're like, how tall are you? So that's an issue for
no,
guys
I
too,
mean you said
apparently.
you want a guy who's taller than you. At
Yeah,
least you
yeah.
gotta
So
give him
above
a
5'8". My height or taller. I don't, or he has to have a tall personality. If he's short in stature, just a tall personality. Whatever that even means.
whatever that.
I don't know, it's just a sense of humor. And there's so much about relationships that I think are just like when you just click with somebody, like you can't put that on a list. Like you can have, like, to me, the non-negotiables would be like he has to love Jesus. Um, we have to have that in common. And then I have a sense of humor. Doesn't even have to be the same sense of humor, but just a sense of humor. Those are probably the only two qualities that are for me, like probably really non-negotiable. Everything else I think just comes down to do you get along? Some similar interests are good,
Now
maybe.
you wrote in your book about blessings. How is that relates to millennials?
So what I talk about as far as blessings, I take, excuse me, I'm gonna get some water. I I talk about legalism and what happened with, I don't know the background of your audience or your background, even as far as if you grew up in church or that, but
I
I
did not, but it doesn't matter. This shows up. I had an atheist here. I have different people. Whatever you share, this show is not about like, oh, we're judging. No, share
okay.
whatever you want.
So my background is I did grow up in church, and I count that as one of my biggest blessings, that I had parents who loved Jesus, and they were always talking about him, and through that, God used that to work on my heart, and I'm grateful for that. But I grew up in this subculture of Bible Belt Christianity. And one of
Mm,
the things that kind of happened, and I don't even know if it was intentional, but we were kind of promised, hey, if you do this and you do this, God's going to bless you with this.
mm-hmm.
Where in reality, so like if we're talking about relationships, I mean, I was told if you uh, live, if you commit to purity, if you commit to not date carelessly, if you wear certain things, if you act a certain way, God's going to bring you a guy who never sinned. He's going to bring you a man who has committed no wrong to treat you like a princess. They didn't explicitly say that, but in all their teachings, that was what was implied, that you do this,
Right.
this plus this, you get this promised blessing. But the Bible doesn't promise me a spouse, nor does he promise me a good spouse if I get one. He doesn't promise me a a perfect marriage or perfect kids if I do everything right. What he promises me is that I'm going to know God in a better way if I follow and obey, and that's even better than any of those things.
Right.
But we kind of started attaching these material blessings to like certain actions, and a lot of those actions are good, and we are called to live in obedience, but you don't obey to get what you want. It's not like a catch-22 to put God in your debt. Like you can never put God in your debt. And I think that's what we subtly did. With
Do you feel cheated?
I do not. I feel, I was thinking about that today, and I was like, I don't know how I ended up as blessed as I've been. I wouldn't trade my life for anything. Marriage and singleness, they both come with different trials and different blessings. And I think if I ever get married, I'll look back on my singleness and realize what I took for granted. And so I do not feel cheated at all. I feel overwhelmingly blessed by God, way more than I deserve. So I'm one of the happiest people I know. And I think that's
You are. You're
say.
very bubbly, very happy
Yeah.
all the
Oh,
time.
that's a show. I cry myself. I was watching something. I was watching my roommate was in the other room, and I was watching. Have you seen that? I don't know. It was some show, and this guy on it was so happy. And I was like, yeah, he probably is suffering from crippling depression, because it's always the people who are super happy who like turn out to, just when the cameras are off or whatever. But I am for the most part incredibly happy with my life and happy with, I don't know. I can find the good in most things.
What would be if God answered your prayer as far as your future, what would that
Mhm.
be? What would that look like?
You know what? I stopped. I have certain desires. I would love to get married. I would love to have kids. I would love to have a book on the bestseller list. I have these like bucket list things for life. I do not want any of that at the expense of what God wants to do with my life. And I
Mm.
would not have said that prior to this past 3 years. I think have been so my brother died, and then a good friend of mine died a few months later. On the day of his funeral, I had a good friend pass away. I had been considering moving to South America for a teaching job. I went to go do a little bit of Spanish, got held at knife point in Costa Rica, which has turned into.
I'm sorry, that's not funny, but that's
No,
God's way of saying you're not going to
yeah.
Costa Rica.
But I was wearing like green Crocs at the time. So like the guy pulled the knife and I was like, yeah, I probably deserve this. And so that happened. And then I had another friend pass away, and then my grandmother had dementia. And so my parents, who were going through losing their son and then having to care for my grandmother in her final stages. So I was going back and forth helping them. So I saw like the suddenness of my brother's death, and I'm watching the slow decline of my grandmother. And I'm just like, it's all terrible. They're like, dying young is terrible. Getting old is terrible. It was just this like, blah. But again, in that, and then my grandmother passed away a year ago in January. So that kind of has been the last like tragic thing that's happened. And then of course, like losing all your work for the year. Let's just throw in unemployment on top of all of that. Why not? Let's just, go for the bingo card of life, difficulties. But it's just been through all of that and seeing God's hand in everything that if you had told me I was going to be going through it, if you had told me, I even talk about this in the book, if you had told me that I would be 36 years old, still single, still renting a room from a friend, having gone through all this tragedy and loss, I would have been throwing a pity party in my whole 20s, because I've been like, that's not what I want. I don't want that life. It's terrible. It sounds horrible. But once you're in it, like God's grace is in each day. So like I'm experiencing that grace now, but you don't see it from if you're looking ahead. Um,
Mm.
so I totally just lost my train of thought right now. But if
No,
here's what it was. I remember what you asked. Yeah, what would I want from my life?
for the few.
I've stopped praying, please give me this by this certain time, please give me this. It's my prayers really have shifted into, okay, God, you know what's best for me, and your will be done, because I know that's what's best for me. I would never have prayed a prayer like that prior to going through the past few years. I never would have. God, when pastors would say, like, you got to trust that God's plans are better for you through hardship, this, I would have been like, what are you talking about? But you have to go through it to get it to move from your head to your heart, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's just whatever. Yeah, God knows what I want, but he knows what I need more than I do. And I don't know that I could do a lot of what I've done if I had a spouse and kids, because I would want to be present as a wife, and I would want to be present as a mom. And you can't do that when you're traveling all over and all that. So for me, it would change a lot. And if the time comes and God calls me to that change, then he'll, give me the grace to shift my role in life. And yeah, it'll be a different set of blessings, different set of trials.
What do you tell a single person, a millennial single right now, who feel their clock ticked and ticking and all that? What do you say
Mhm.
to them from your experience?
I would say that they are not a statistic. I would say, remember, to God, you are not a statistic, because I think we hear this. Like, we're getting married later and you're not going to be able to have kids once you reach this certain point and all of that. And it's very easy to start to feel like you're lumped into this group of people who's just kind of failed at life. Um, Nothing is by accident. So what the world sees as failure, what the church sees as failure, I think there's a lot of churches out there that would see not being married and not having kids as kind of this, you've failed in some way. Like, what did you do
Mm.
wrong to not get that? So they just assume that you've done something or avoided something to not progress to the next life stage. But I would say that God redeems everything. And so I use my older sister, who's also single, and we've had conversations about just getting older, and kind of start to feel a little pushed to the margins a little bit at a certain point if you don't progress to that next life stage. And it's not
Mm.
just marriage. I know friends who haven't been able to have kids, and they feel similarly pushed to the margins because they just haven't done what society and the church thinks that where you should be. But my sister is fostering, and she is a nurse, and she gets medically fragile kids. And so, meaning that the kids that she has taken care of are kids that come with broken bones and all of that, and little babies.
Mm.
And I'm seeing God use her singleness. And then the other thing they say is, a lot of these kids, because of what they've been through, they almost have to be placed in a home without a man to help them,
Mm.
rebuild trust and stuff, just because of what they've been through. And so it's just a beautiful example of how God can redeem singleness. She didn't want to be single at this age, and she wanted to have kids, but she has the most beautiful and adorable, 1.5-year-old little girl that she may end up adopting. We don't know. Anything could happen, but it's just, yeah, it's just seeing how God works things that the world looks at and is like, that was a failure. What a wasted life. um Sorry, my dad was texting me. I didn't know if he was watching and had a question. It was like, don't say
Oh, he
that.
did.
um
Does he have a question?
No, he wants me to upload photos from. I did the Huckabee Show a couple weeks
Oh,
ago,
yes.
so he's been begging me to upload photos from that.
The
So
Huckabee Show.
maybe do
Yes. I
that.
remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, all that to say, just because uh, culture has deemed your life worthless or a waste,
Mhm.
God is in the business of redeeming. And so even if it's not what you expect it to look like his redemption of your life may not be the marriage, the spouse, the 401k plan, and all of that, but he will, for his glory and your good, he will redeem where you are.
Okay, I'm looking at the Facebook trying to see if there's any questions. One of the questions comes from Michael Ramirez. Does your sister like shorter guys?
My sister likes shorter guys, I will have to ask her. She's kind of shy. She's gonna be so mad at me if she finds out I put her on the spot like this. But I'll find out. I think she's about 5'6", so she's working with a little less.
Okay, I'm trying to access all the comments where to see. There's 100 comments already,
Oh
but
wow.
I'm not able to. I don't know. Facebook plays games here sometimes, but
Yeah, I was
I'm
trying
not
to
able.
share it to my pages, and
Yeah. Okay, we can share it while we're doing so your friends can
your
what do you
sister, I
call
see
it?
it now. Yeah, I'm on
Yeah,
here.
it does okay. Yes. Okay. I can't comment, but after the show, if you wanna, I'll share it with you, and you can comment. Like text. You're a writer, so you have no problem writing responses to them.
Yeah,
Uh
yeah.
let's see. I wanted to in that, what do you call it? I talk about, you think, when I think of millennials, sometimes I think of people who is I'm not going to do a job unless it's going to be boom, it's going to make an impact, it's going to change the world.
Right,
Is
right.
that true about millennials, or we're just a stereotype?
Um, I think it is true. Yeah, so here's what I think happened, like millennials getting that push for like I want to do big things, all of that. That was your question, right? I was
Yes.
posting this to my Facebook page so people could watch it as you were asking that. So I was half paying attention. Which that would be the title of my autobiography, would be Half Paying Attention if I ever wrote one. So I think because like my parents and like my grandparents generation, like they all saw work as a way to provide for their families because they were kind of born into a little bit harder times, and so they started off with hardship and worked toward comfort, but because like their kids were born into this stability and this comfort, we had more of a luxury of being like, hey, pursue your dreams, so we were born with this idea that life should be easy and the hard moments few, when in reality life is hard and the easy moments are kind of the exception to that. But we had the luxury of, we had a stable upbringing, we had parents to kind of fall back on, not all of us but a lot of us. And so I think that's why parents were like, hey, you are free to go pursue your dreams, do something you love, because now that you're provided for, that next step after that is, doing something you love and something that quote fulfills you, which I don't think anything can fully fulfill you, I mean, outside of, Jesus. um
Amen.
but uh but a lot of parents did, they wanted their kids to not have to work these jobs that they didn't like just to provide. They wanted something better for us, because that's what each generation generally pushes. They want better for their kids, and so that was the next step. The stability was there, the next thing that was better was enjoyment. And so I think that's why. But then because I mean, we're all fallen, and our tendency is to kind of, you know mess things up, I guess. We just took it too far and put too much pressure on finding the perfect thing to
Hmm.
fill that role in our lives, rather than just be like, okay, let's find something that works. It's like, well, if I choose this, there's 100 other things that I might like better. How do I know which one I'm going to like the best? And, so it ended up just having this pressure.
Now, in the last 5 minutes, I want to ask you this. You're a great speaker. You do aspire women. You speak. When you speak to women's conferences, and I know there's people listening
Mhm.
that do are key, what do you call it, gatekeepers for women's
Yeah.
event. What do you talk about? What do you speak different than other women speakers?
So I mean, my talks, I try to make them as humorous as possible because I think humor is such a great tool for just breaking down those barriers. I mean, recently I have shared about loss and about um grief, and then just also about like what do you do when your life doesn't look the way you want. I think everybody can relate to expectations being not met in life, whether it's you get married and you think that's going to solve everything, and then marriage is hard, or you have kids thinking those are going to be fulfilling, and all they do is keep you up at night and make a mess with everything, and they're constantly sticky. Like, how are kids always sticky? I don't understand. um but I think everyone can relate to just life doesn't go the way we hope or plan, but it's still good. So one of the things I like to say is life can be very hard and very good at the same time. The hard doesn't cancel out the good. In many ways, it makes you appreciate it. So that would be.
Now, w- what can my fans, my listeners, the viewers do to help your book just hit hard and sell? I know one of the thing I want to tell,
Mm,
if you're a pastor or a company, or you're a CEO of a company and you want to appreciate your staff or your volunteers, the best thing is buy a case or two of the books
mm,
and hand
mm.
them out as a gift. And people have done that for my books, and it's really, it feels great for the staff. And so that's one way you can do with Christian's book. And also,
Yeah.
what other ways? What can they do to
Yeah,
help?
if yeah, buy a copy if you like it. Share the Amazon link with on your Facebook pages, share it with friends. I mean, at this point, it's really just kind of getting the word out. If your church has a young adults group or a bookstore, take it to them and say, "Hey, would you carry this?" I mean, just anything to help get the word out is wonderful, especially since we can't get out and do shows right now, and that's one of the main ways of getting the word out when something is released, and that part of it has been taken away right now. So
Uh,
yeah, any sharing of it would be helpful.
right now, considering the COVID, and a lot of people lost loved ones, close friends, and
Mm,
I can't think of a better speaker for your church service at this point. On not necessarily on the weekend service, but in anything. If you do this virtually or you do that, it's Kristen can talk about loss and grief
mm.
and handle it. She handled it in a very godly way, and I want to encourage you, if you're a pastor or a leader, or this would be a great speaker to have you. How can people get a hold of you, Christian?
My website, which maybe I can put it in the comments when we're done
Yes,
here
yes,
later.
and the book link on the
Yeah,
there.
my website is KristenWeberOnline.com. Or you can find me on Facebook. It's Kristen Weber Comedy is my Facebook link. But Kristen Weber Online, you can email me through there, and you can also see clips. I was realizing as you were reading my bio, I was like, I don't think I've updated that in a couple of years. um, so I need to update my bio. But
But it's
yeah,
Kristen with an I, K
Kristen with
R
two eyes.
I
Yes,
S T I N. She
yes,
has two
one
eyes, blue
Kristen,
eyes, right?
two eyes, and then
Two
Weber,
blue eyes,
one B, two blue eyes, two eyes. Yeah.
two
And
eyes, and one
Weber
B.
is Weber. So Kristen
Kristen
Weber
Weber
Online.com.
Online.com.
Yeah. And
So
I got to run off somewhere right now, but when I come back, I'll put everything in the comments.
I'm gonna ask you something. I mean, it's just I don't do it every show or every 10 shows. Would you pray for us?
I
Pray
would
for
love
the
to.
single people. Pray for people who
Yeah,
feel
absolutely.
marginalized in this
Yes.
at all time. Go ahead.
Yes. All right. Lord, thank you so much for this time to talk with Nazareth. I pray for each person watching, whether it's live or later. I pray for anyone who feels like their life has just not gone as planned, and they don't know how to fix it. They don't know how to solve it, and they feel like maybe it's been wasted. I pray that you would give them a new sense of hope, and that you would just speak to them and reveal that nothing is wasted if it's done in you, and just give them a renewed sense of purpose, Lord. We ask you all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much,
You're
Christian.
so
Thank you
welcome.
for
Thank you,
that.
Nazareth.
And I want to thank you, listeners and people who are
Yeah,
viewing
thanks,
this. Thank
people.
you. Yes, please share this. If you can just share it on Facebook, or you can, if you subscribe to, please subscribe. If I know some of you just watch the show, would you go to the podcast and subscribe? If you go to iTunes or Spotify or something, subscribe so you can get it.
I would
Pray
love
for the
And
to.
single people.
also,
Pray
I
for
want you
Yeah,
real.
absolutely.
yeah, so I want you to know also tonight and every weeknight at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook, Comedian Nazareth, we have our Live with Nash show for an hour where you can become the comedian and we can encourage you at the end and pray with you. So, Kristen, if you ever awake at let's see, 10:30
Here
at
at
night,
10:30. It's close to
yeah,
my
you're
bedtime.
single. You're single. You can stay up late. Join us on the page on the Facebook and the show, and you can just you're very funny. So
Thank
comment.
you. All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Sounds
God
good.
bless you
Thank
guys.
you.
We'll see you
God bless everyone.
next week. Is Lee Strobel, The Kids for Christ, the movie, the best-selling New York bestseller author, the Chicago Tribune journalist. He's gonna be with us next Tuesday. So join us. Thank you so much, and love you guys, and God bless you. Have a great day.